Good day to you people of the internet. Today I want to show you guys my very simple process for putting bends into rigid tubing. There's no magic involved here. It's just a little bit of heat, patience, and a couple of really simple tools. But before we get into that process itself, let's talk about the tube a little bit. During this video, we're going to talk about PETG rigid tubing. This is my preferred tubing, and I think pretty much the tubing of choice for most rigid builds these days. But some other things you might encounter are acrylic, glass, and copper. Now, back in the day, people would use acrylic tubing. It was very, very clear, but it was very brittle. So for example, if you were to take a piece of acrylic tubing and hit it on your workbench, chances are you'd get some spider cracks in the tube itself, which would compromise that piece. Versus this PETG is absolutely unflawed, and I know I can trust it in my loop. So I've also seen people use glass, which has very similar properties to acrylic, very clear but very brittle. And one time online I seen a guy use copper for a pretty unique steampunk build, but again, that's beyond the scope of this video. PETG is pretty much what you're going to see on most people's rigs these days because it's very easy to work with, it's very durable, it comes in a wide variety of colors. So for this video we're going to focus on this bend right here, getting the 90 into a simple piece of tubing, and just show you guys that process. So let's stop talking about it and get to work. So for this you're going to need a couple of things. Obviously your tubing of choice. Right now we're going to be working with Monsoon branded tubing in the color of blood red. Monsoon is the same company that make my reservoir, so I was able to get the colors matched perfectly. But you can go with anything else. For example, I have some Primo Chill here in clear, and this is the same diameter inside and outer. It's just about anybody else out there. Next up, you're going to need a heat source, such as this Milwaukee hot air gun. Now, you can use any kind of hot air gun, but I do recommend a hot air gun. Even something simple like a Harbor Freight brand will get the job done. Next, and this is my personal opinion, is get yourself a pipe cutter. I've seen some guys use hacksaws, but the problem with hacksaws is while you're making your cut, if you're not doing it perfectly and your blade jumps, now you've got problems in your plastic, where this works really well. Get yourself a little file for cleaning up any burrs on your cut. I recommend a compressed air source for cleaning up any debris after you've made your cut. I also recommend having a jug of cool water nearby, if the bends you're making will fit in something as such. Otherwise, I just use the sink. I'll get into this a little bit more later. And then the number one important thing you need for bending hard tubing is a silicone insert that matches the inner diameter of your tube. Now let me explain this really quick. If you've got your tube, it's hollow on the inside, right? So when you're applying heat to it from the heat gun, if you were to make a bend when the plastic is soft, and the inside is hollow, the hollow will collapse on itself and you'll get either complete blockage or it'll get deformed and it just won't look good. However, if you have a silicone insert that you slide into the tube where you're making your bend, now that fills that void and you get a very clean, uniform bend that's going to have very few, if any, defects in it at all. So again, these are very important. You can get them at pretty much any supply shop like a Frozen CPU or a Performance PCS or Amazon or whatever, but good tool to have. Okay, so again, the bend that we're going to be focusing right now is the outlet of our monoblock that's taking a 90 and jagging right up into the radiator. So without further ado, let's get started. Now we've got our silicone insert in. We're going to set our heat gun to low. Now, when you're warming up your plastic, you want to make sure to not just focus the heat on one point. Okay? You don't want to have a cooler plastic on the outside, no, a really hot plastic in the middle, because again, you want the plastic to bend naturally. You don't want any tugging or stress putting anywhere. Another thing to keep in mind is when you're bending, be slow and uniform with your bend. Try not to twist. Any inconsistencies in your process will have obviously effect on the results. So what I like to do is kind of start off by just gently warming the whole piece up. And then when I know that I'm warm, I'll focus more on the area that I'm going to put my bend in while slowly rotating. And when I'm able to grab one end of the plastic and see it just ever so slightly sag, I know I'm at about the temperature I want to make my bend. So then I can take my plastic tube, make the bend that I want, get it the shape that I'm interested in, and then quickly dab it in the water to lock in that final shape. So let's give it a shot and see what we can do. All right, we're not quite there yet. But I can feel it start to become flexible. Oh, there we go. You see the slight bend? So I've got a 90 that I'm interested in holding. I'm going to get it exactly how I want it and then dip it into the water. And as you can see right here, the result is not too bad. We got a nice 90 here. Silicone insert comes right out. We've got no collapse in the wall. We got a really good bend here. All right, so we're going to move back and test this out in the build.
The battery on my mic died, so I'm just going to voice over the rest of this one clip. Anyways, after successfully bending your tube, you're going to want to hold it in place and make sure that the angle of your bend is correct, and make sure the length of tube going from connector to connector is correct. Now we can see from this video that the length of tube going from the radiator down to that first bend is pretty much perfect, but from the bend to the monoblock is a little long and going to need to be trimmed down. Now the fittings I'm using in this build are Primo Chill revolver fittings, and what I'm doing here is just seeing how deep the tube fits into the connector so we can accommodate that when we measure for our first cut. Now we'll put the pipe back into place, and once we're comfortable with how much needs to be removed, I'll just go ahead and mark it with my fingers. Now, as mentioned before, we don't want to use a razor blade or a hacksaw, and just a traditional pipe cutter will work. I actually purchased this one from an auto parts store for doing brake lines, but after cleaning it up, it worked perfect for this. Now you put the tubing into the pipe cutter, and you rotate the bottom wheel until it snugs itself up against the blade. Now the blade is actually a wheel itself, so once it's sitting nice and firm, you can go ahead and just rotate the tool around the pipe, and it cuts or scores the tube, as seen here in the video. Now you can turn the wheel a quarter turn and rotate around the pipe, a quarter turn and rotate around the pipe, and continue to do this until you cut all the way through the tube. Now we'll just remove the excess and see how it fits. Now the fit is nice, but we can see there's still just a little bit too much from the bend to the monoblock.
So I've got myself a flat file. We want to make sure we put it on a flat surface so we're indeed wearing a flat line and not a cockeyed or beveled line. Now let's work on trimming down just a little bit more of this plastic. All right, that's going to look perfect. All right, so we can see we've got a lot of burrs left here on the plastic, and that's where I come back with this little file and kind of just finish it off. So when you're done cleaning up your ends, it should look something like this. No burrs, nice and clean. I'd recommend using an air compressor at this point to blow out any dust that you might have generated during filing. Unfortunately, it's late where I'm at right now, so I can't use the compressor and I have to skip this step at the moment, but you guys shouldn't. Always make sure your tubes are clean. So now that your tube is clean, you want to make sure the fit's still there, and I recommend trying it out with a fully put together with a fitting, just to make sure that all your tolerances are clear. So we can see that that fits really nice and is going to look great when it's done. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, consider hitting that like button or subscribe. Otherwise, we'll catch you at the next video. Take it easy.